And I'd like to kick this off with really the person who's heading the company that has really triggered the EV revolution, Tata Motors, really a dominant market share right now. Shailesh, so would like to start with you. I think EVs are set to cross the 1 lakh mark in this year, which is a big number. I think the demand has been good, though there have been some quarter-on-quarter corrections. But just looking at what's happening globally, just like your thoughts on the global situation right now, because there has been slowdown in markets. There is a kind of rethinking that, is the penetration moving as fast? In India, we are just 2% right now, maybe a little bit more. So obviously a low base, so growth will be there. But, just looking at the international scenario, just to kind of get a context from you, what is happening here. Also, there's this view that, a lot of the early adopters now, they're saturated. And, to use your term, the early majority. Is there a big divide between early adopters and early majority? So, just getting your sense, global perspective, and what's happening in India. Just wanted, you to just give your opening remarks on this.
Sure. Thanks, Hormuz, for the question. Multiple questions. I'm just trying to remember all of them. But let me start with, recently we have seen flurry of articles, around all gloom and doom around EVs, because there is a slowdown, that kind of impression one is getting. But of course, I would have also got intrigued and did some fact check on that. And actually, when you see the data, it speaks very different. If you see this calendar year, 9 months gone, already the market, BEVs, I'm saying, not PHEV, only the BEVs has grown by 33% on a very strong base, I'm saying. And key markets, if you take China, has grown by 26%. Europe has grown by about 40%. When I say Europe, these are the top 5 countries there. It has grown by 40%. And US, surprisingly, where all the articles are, focused around, has grown by 64%. So therefore, factually, when you see EVs are growing at a pace, it can always be a question mark whether it is growing at the pace that one was expecting it to grow, because there has been a steep growth phase. It's on the S-curve, as you know. So it is always difficult to assess, what will be the next growth rate. So if you see the 3 geographies, there are nuances. In US, you are seeing an economic uncertainty. There's a high interest rate, so there is a slight slowdown. Therefore, when you compare to 100% and all, it is a slowdown. But that, to some extent, that high interest cost and the stock situation, which might be a forecast error, is being compensated through, a situation of high inventory and therefore discounting happening. In Europe, the subsidy in one of the biggest market like Germany has gone down, so there is a slight sense of slowdown that you see. In China, it is going through a consolidation phase, and again, subsidy which has been cut a bit. So it's a mix of very nuanced, events which are happening in different parts of the globe. But the Q3 also, if you see the growth, it's very strong, 27, 28%. So therefore, one has to always assess the commentary that one is getting basis what was the expectation of the growth and where it is. It is still strong. Having said that, I think as far as India is concerned, let me complete the India part. Frankly, again, if I see the first half of this financial year, the growth is 107%. We ourselves have grown by 76%. There has been a lot of launch activity in the first half of the year. Q2 of this financial year has been a dip, quarter on quarter. And again, you would have seen this calendar year has been a year of launches which has not happened in the EV industry in India ever, right? We have Stellantis, which has launched Citroen EC3, then you have Mahindras who have launched, then you have MG which has gone for launch. The Tiago EV got launched at the start of the year. So whenever you launch a new product, there is a huge demand that you generate, and also you fill the channel. So, and we are always seeing the offtake data. So it is an impact of this stabilizing. There is some level of stock correction which is happening. So you might see this flowing to this quarter also. But beyond that, I think the growth rates are going to be strong. Long-term story of BEVs is not a choice. It's an imperative because all the nations have signed for net carbon zero. The same pressure is on all the OEMs. So there's no choice. It is only a matter of how fast this is going to happen. So that's broadly the perspective on what's happening, really.
Right, so clearly I think, it is a question of how quickly. I mean, there's no obviously going back, it can't be, or even a significant slowdown. It's just how fast we will go and the pace of transition. So, I'd like to turn to you, Aditya. I think you've launched the EC3. In fact, I think you have come into the market quite a late entrant, but you've been very quick in launching an electric vehicle even before a lot of other OEMs. So really very fast from, ICE vehicle and then EV. But to be honest, volumes haven't been great. So just wanted to get your experience. How are you seeing the market? Because clearly at one end, we've got Tata Motors, which dominates the market, 85 plus or whatever market share there is. And, you've got everyone else in the mix. So I'm just trying to understand, from your perspective, what does it take to really get into the mass market? Because clearly your products are for that, a broader audience.
Thanks so much. So if we look at the Citroën portfolio today, we launched the EC3 within 6 months of the ICE launch. So in terms of timeline, that's our commitment. When we launch an ICE vehicle, we're very quick to market when it comes to an EV. And the reason for that is customer interest, customer demand. So in order to take the customer interest and customer demand to the next level, we have to look at the top 3 reasons why customers are shying away at this point from EVs. And I'm not talking about the torchbearers. I'm talking about the mainstream customers. What are their reasons for shying away? So today, obviously, it is range anxiety. Most consumers, even though their travel is limited or maybe limited, they still look at that occasional day during the year or 5 times in the year when they need more range than their vehicles can to offer. So range anxiety is one. Second is overall education. Very often, even I get questions, you change the battery in your cell phone so often, what happens to your EV? You have to change the battery in your EV and it's going to be a huge cost. This is a lack of education. Batteries in EVs, they last a while. Look at just the warranties that we offer. It's 8 years, 10 years. And even after that, batteries have useful life. Second life, third life before recycling. That's the second point. Education is important. Third is charging infrastructure. When we look at charging infrastructure, it is home charging, it is public charging, and also other workplace charging. We need to build an ecosystem where consumers have zero worry when it comes to charging outside of their home. Right? Home charging is a little different equation outside of the home. So we've seen this happening in other markets. For example, in Europe, you have various charge point operators who have come together and their charging stations are available on a single app, single payment gateway. Today, if you have to travel across India and you have to charge your vehicle, your EV, you have to use multiple applications on your cell phone. We need one common interface where consumers can look at all charging options, look at which chargers, 1, are available, 2, are working, and 3, initiate charge from their phone and pay for charging from their phone. But that is the ideal state. So we need these 3 things to work in tandem for the mainstream to embrace EVs. Now, I didn't state the obvious. Obviously, the acquisition cost of EVs today is 25% higher versus maybe an ICE vehicle. However, if you drive sufficiently, your total cost of ownership is much less or is very competitive. So we need that balance. And obviously, cost of batteries is coming down. We've seen it come down to 10% of what it was today versus 10 years ago. And that needs to further come down in order to have acquisition cost parity. Right? Now, when that is going to happen is anyone's guess. But I think with EVs, it's very sticky. The more cars we see on the road, the more green license plates, number plates we see on the road, the sticky effect increases and consumers start understanding that, okay, maybe we can take a chance. So I think these are different factors that need to be taken into account, but consumer education I would put right on top of the list.
Thanks, Aditya. I think, I mean, all points well covered there. And, Balbir, turning to you, looking at the luxury segment, a lot of action over there. Obviously, a much smaller pie, but a lot of launches. Do you think luxury car buyers are really early adopters and you're finding at that level or that price points, in fact, it's very competitive with ICE vehicles? And given the huge difference in, let's say, the GST also, even pricing is coming very close to your ICE equivalents. So just to get your sense in terms of the customer profile, how are they embracing EVs? Obviously, the challenges have been there, but clearly it's quite obvious things like infrastructure, maybe range, because a lot of vehicles have long range, are not as much of an issue. So do you think, though it's a very small market, that really the maximum adoption in terms of percentage can happen in the luxury market?
So good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. I think luxury space has been always in the forefront of any new technology that comes by. So I would say from a customer's point of view, there has been a fantastic adoption. But I personally believe that, any change that has to come, it goes through three phases. So first is adoption, which we are going through right now. Probably this adoption phase may be 2 years, maybe 4 years, probably towards 4 years, because one, not all the players are in yet. We are not addressing all the price points. We are available right now only in certain price points. Most of the cars that we are selling in luxury space in EVs are imported still, and they come at the highest possible import duty. So, when all the players are in, and also not all the cars are yet launched. So, all of us in luxury space, there are a lot of cars that are yet to come. So we are not yet firstly available in all the price points. So I think that's the first side. So this adoption phase that has to happen. The next phase, I believe, will be a sustenance phase where you have a lot of people who have bought these cars. Now they will go through a cycle of selling these cars and buying the next cycle. So will that be the next car? If somebody buys today an EV, will his next or her next car would be an EV or ICE pack? So we will go through that cycle, and there the fence sitters will also come by. That will come by only with the experience of the first adopters. I think we will go through that cycle, and the last cycle, of course, will be then scalability. And this is where the major jump will happen. Coming back to where the luxury segment is, I think in terms of today, we are at about 5 to 6% penetration, and which has happened just about 2 years' time. But this is only because most of the cars today are at the top end of the pyramid. But as we launch more and more cars, I think we believe that by the year 2028, 2030, penetration in the luxury space will be close to 50%. And you also know that, Audi globally has also decided that we will be a fully electric car company by 2033. So we will move towards this direction, and we'll move fast.
Move on, just to understand from your point, because the luxury cars, because of the virtue of their size and obviously price as well, can have really long ranges close to 600 kilometers. Is that a very crucial factor in deciding, or is it more the charging infra you feel is more of a concern?
I think it's a combination of both, but we believe that I think 600 to 700 kilometers range is something which gives a lot of comfort to our customers. Generally, whatever cars we have sold so far, by and large, the customers are using the cars in city. The car is not used more than 100 kilometers. But it's like a little bit of a psychology as well, because many of us, including my own self, I want my mobile to be always 70% plus charged. So that kind of anxiety remains in our mind, that what happens if this happens? What happens if the charging is not available? Some of the problems which were just mentioned, that we have almost 70 charging point operators in the country. So what are the solutions? Because every time everybody has to download an app to charge. So for an example, we've developed for our customers an app, and we've gotten many charge point operators on board where our customers don't need to download any other app. There's just one app, and the customer can also see if the charging point is working or not working. So, all these kind of solutions, when the customers start using, it'll become much more comfortable, and the option will be much faster.
Thanks, Balbir. Rahul, turning to you, looking at this panel, to be honest, probably the only, on this, the only ones who aren't in the EV space yet. Now, Maruti is the market leader. been market leader for decades. Being very honest, one would have thought, you would have jumped into the EV space in terms of trying to lead the market there as well. So just to understand your strategy, do you think, you didn't foresee how quickly the EV adoption would be? Do you think the timing is still good when you're planning to come out? You have announced plans to bring EVs in, but just to get your sense and your strategy that you've played a bit of a wait and watch game, while I'll be honest, Tata Motors have run ahead with the market in this. Do you think it's going to be a bit of a challenge, or do you think, the timing is still, it's still a very, very early race, which a lot of people say? I mean, we're just out of the starting blocks and still there's a long way ahead. And what is your strategy going to be looking at the current trends, and what are the learnings you are taking from what has happened in the last, typically 5 years when it really kind of kicked off?
Of course, we have a lot of appreciation and admiration for Tata Motors in the leadership of Mr. Shailesh Chandra, the way they have launched models and tried to build the market. Every manufacturer would have his own context and strategy by which he approaches the electrification journey. I think for a market leader, a volume leader, it is the responsibility to bring in electrification with localization and with scale. So, of course, we've been watching this space and we've been studying it. We want to build the foundation before we build the facade. So, about 2 years back, we announced our first BEV battery manufacturing plant with cell-level localization, the plant that is coming up in Gujarat. Of course, we have another plant at the parent level, Suzuki joint venture, which is making India's first lithium-ion cells already, and we are exporting it also. And we'll be doing about 1,000 crore exports of lithium-ion cells from India, maybe next year. We want to ensure that when we enter this market, we do it with localization and with scale. Now, the equations that most manufacturers, when we go to the drawing board and we try to work out how to make it viable, the volumes at this stage were not sufficient to make a battery plant viable. So the next question was, how do we build those volumes? So we thought the obvious choice is exports. So when we launch our EV, it will be on the back of domestic volumes and export volumes also, because of which the battery and the cell manufacturing could become viable. Of course, we'll work at both battery and the motor also. There are only 3 major modules which are different systems, which are different between an ICE and a BEV: the battery, the motor, and a lot of electronics. Electronics, of course, we know India, the manufacturing is yet to begin in a serious way. Both the battery and the motor we are working on the localization, and so when we launch it, we will have that. Since it will be our first product, it has to be a serious product with good, high specifications to give consumers the confidence. So it will be a design from scratch for electric, high specs like 550 kilometer range, 60 kilowatt hour battery. And of course, we'll follow up with a lot of models all the way till 2030. And not just electric, we are working on all possible technologies for decarbonization, and we are studying hydrogen also. Today, I observed that there is only a two-dimensional, we are talking about IC to EV and nothing else. The reality is far more comprehensive and far more complex. We have many technologies on the horizon that will help us in decarbonization, at least for the next 10, 15 years or so.
So clearly what you're saying is you want to come in with high level of localization
and scale.
That's been your strategy for scale. So Shailesh, just turning to you, I just want to come on the cost issue clearly. That's what Rahul was saying, which localization and scale gets. I think from your standpoint, you've been quick to the market, an ICE conversion. Obviously, the supply chain has not been developed. That's been a strategy to get in. But, obviously that is the long-term way of really getting costs down, of really building the supply chain. So, from a cost perspective, since I want to just take the whole cost issue, is, PLI schemes dropping prices, LFP prices coming down, and just, further eking out scale with localization, just to understand your strategy on that. And when do you think, EVs could reach a tipping point or really come close, all things being the same, especially all the government incentives and taxation rates, which really hinges on making the price competitive. Are we heading faster in that direction right now? And do you think that time will come soon? I mean, just to get a forecast on really the whole cost issue, because still bill of materials is very, very high, compared to an ICE vehicle. Yeah. I think I can take mine.
See, the cost is a trend which is locked in. If you really see the ICE trend of cost and the trend of an EV technology cost, ICE technologies will see an inflationary trend because of the stringent emission norms. It's given, and EVs will see a deflationary trend. So there is a break point at some stage that you're going to see. Now, the tipping point which you said is ideally, if you ask a customer what price you're going to pay for an electric car, ideally for him, for the mainstream buyers, I mean, not for the early adopters. Early adopter is ready to pay 25-30% premium, but a mainstream late majority or a mainstream buyer is going to say, give me at the same acquisition price as an ICE. In the foreseeable future, I'm saying less than 1 year, 1.5 years, you're going to see a 200 to 250 kilometer real range car in the mass market hitting that level.
Sailesh, I just want to stop you there. Are you saying that until EVs become close in terms of price parity, only then the mass market will accept it? Because I think the early adopters are doing 25%.
It's very easy for them to accept it.
Right.
Only
So
from
that
a
is
price
no
perspective. See,
right.
because EV is not as simple as bringing a product and a range and then it sells. Because it's a whole ecosystem challenge that you have to sort out, right? Always one would like to start with a situation where you are able to bring down the cost by localizing at a high scale. But if your ecosystem is not ready, that scale is of no importance. So ecosystem develops over a period of time, because it is not only the auto manufacturer which have to participate here. You have to keep giving the confidence to the ecosystem players to invest. And that happens through a typical ramp up of, the cycle of S-curve that we see from early adopter to early majority and so on. And that's why you see that 5 years back when we started, nobody was ready to invest in supply chain. Nobody was ready to invest into charging infra. Fast forward today, 5 years from now, there is a huge confidence. You see a lot of CPO would have also participated in today's time. We are seeing huge excitement on the investment. There is greater confidence of consumer. There's greater consumer confidence is not coming just from the product. Product is only one aspect. But the whole ecosystem around that has to develop. Therefore, I'm saying the whole thing has to happen progressively. Localization will also happen progressively, because you can't convince a supplier that the market is ready if they also don't see all the barriers to EV adoption having broken. It was difficult for Tata Motors to even reach or come to a situation where the country has more than 100,000 electric vehicles without a TACO playing a role, right? Tata Auto Components. Right. Because no questions asked, they invested, and there was an anchor customer which was ready to take their components. So it's a progressive journey. No market has overnight shifted to a new technology which requires an ecosystem solution, not just a product. Right. But so, therefore, just answering your question, sorry, I have not still answered your question. Localization definitely is going to bring down the cost, because there's a lot of uncertainties that you are able to overcome, like Forex, the whole logistics cost for bringing from somewhere else to here. There's a PLI incentive which is supporting you to bring those investments. Frankly, initially when we localized, it was expensive. The component cost was expensive as compared to an import, even with duty on that. But you had to start that journey. Now, as you're scaling up, now you're seeing the benefits coming in along with the PLI. So next 4 or 5 years will be a very supportive phase of ramping up the supply side. And you see, all the European suppliers who were not reluctant earlier are very much eager to now invest in India, not only the Indian auto component suppliers, even Indian auto component suppliers who are not very, confident about investing in this space are also forthcoming now and investing here. So I think over a period of time, when you reach 15 to 20% kind of a penetration level, which is, you said rightly, it is 2% right now, so you don't have still scale within the country itself. That is when you will start hitting a meaningful level of scale, where you can start really comparing yourself from a market like, say, China, which is now today at 5 million sales of EVs every year. So it's going to take some time before you really hit those levels. But in this period, the cost disadvantage that you'll have will be supported through PLI.
Right. So PLI definitely going to have a huge impact. Aditya, turning to you, you've heard Rahul talking about exports as well. One way, I mean, scale is becoming quite important. Again, looking at your products and honestly, your volume still quite small. How do you see, going forward in terms of your strategy? Clearly, you also need a lot of volume. I mean, you spoke about earlier the kind of hurdles that there are and the limits of market penetration. But I think, clearly Tata Motors has proved that you can have pretty big volumes in this, and other players are also joining. So just your thoughts, exports, PLI, deep localization. I mean, I think localization is something you all have started from the get-go, even with your ICE vehicles. So is that really the way forward? And, what is Stellantis looking at? And clearly, again, just to focus, is exports going to be a very big part of the play?
Sure. Yeah, without volumes, this game is going to be much harder, right? And in order to secure volumes, we have to have our cost structure has to be very competitive. So exports is a significant part of our strategy, and in order to be able to be competitive even in the export market, deep localization hallmarks that you mentioned, it's not just the localization, but it's the local content, which makes it very significant. So with Citroën, we've started, our localization levels are 90% plus, even our local levels are pretty significant. Now is the challenge with EVs. There are some limitations we have at this point in terms of the battery, the battery pack, getting the cells. So that is something that we're working on. And I think what becomes really different when we talk about EVs is, in order to succeed, earlier the world went away from vertical integration. Now, vertical integration is again becoming the flavor of the day, because there are strengths in vertical integration that helps develop a strong competitive base. So for us at Stellantis, obviously the Southeast Asian market is a big market that we want to achieve with production from India. We also are looking at Africa and the Middle East. But exports is going to be a very significant strategy when we look at volumes, and vertical integration again is going to become significantly important when we look at keeping our cost structures very competitive.
Aditya, Balbir, turning to you, clearly on, again, looking at costs, being CPUs largely, it is quite expensive. Custom duties haven't changed. So really, just to get your thoughts, a little bit of a delicate topic, but, there's been this talk of, there's a certain push from certain quarters or automakers to kind of have pushing government to try and reduce duties on imports. So your thoughts on that? And also from your point of view, is CKD one way forward? Obviously, you can't go to full-blown manufacturing, but at least your side to at least take that step and, let's say, start doing knockdown or parts and components of your cars. So really, on the cost issue, which really is, let's say, the cost challenges are the highest in your segment. So we just want your thoughts on that, especially on duties right now.
Yeah, before I answer this question, I just want to also share with everybody that I believe that, electric mobility or EVs, this has to be a marathon. This is not a sprint. So all of us have to be patient. And we always talk about what is the penetration levels. I think this will grow. We have to have sustainable actions in place, including from manufacturers, including from charging infrastructures, and also including the governments. Whatever support we are getting from the government side, it has to remain sustainable for, let's say, a decade or so, 5 to 10 years. Then we will actually achieve a good penetration of EVs. Now, coming back to your question of import duties, of course, our belief is that the segment that we operate in the luxury space, this segment still is under 50,000 cars annually. And you have almost 10 players who are selling the cars in India. And each of the players sells, let's say, 10 to 15 models. So you can imagine that per model sale in the luxury space is very, very low. So probably the highest, let's say, one single model in luxury space that is sold in India is close to about 2,000 cars in a year. So what happens is that when we have more and more models being launched globally, if we have to decide which model we need to choose, we need to understand the local market, and we need to understand, and we sometimes need to bring in more model to test the markets, and then eventually decide which model should we assemble in India and which we should not. So that was the reason we always have been saying that for a limited period of time, we need, let's say, some support on reduction of import duties, which should help us test the market, and then we decide how do we move forward in terms of assembling these cars locally. So that's been our request to the government. Of course, there is no doubt that on the GST side, we have a support, and many progressive states have been giving 0% registration cost on the cars. And then there are certain benefits on the taxation side and cost of ownership, etc. But yes, one of the factor, till the time we reach certain threshold, the import duties do play kind of a negative role today, that we are not able to sell enough cars because most of the cars that we are selling are above 1 crore, for an example.
Rahul, turning to you all, you all know this market really well. It's what is your thought on, let's say, till the end of the decade? How do you see EV demand panning out? Where do you see the main hurdles? Is it finally going to be something like charging infrastructure? Because that really is turning out to be a bottleneck, even with a small 2% penetration. I mean, I'll be honest, even CNG, that after so many years, that network is not sorted out. The question is, can we have a strong EV network looking at that kind of a scenario? Obviously, governments have to play a big role over here. And I think we've heard, even the Tamil Nadu government really saying that charging infra is where they're going to give support. So just considering all these factors, price, cost, just a little bit of crystal gazing into 2030. I mean, it's a long way off, won't hold you to it, obviously, but just to get a sense, because you all are coming into a market, obviously, with understanding that the potential is going to be kicking off at that point. That's really going to be the turning point in terms of a spike in EV demand, let's say middle of this decade, 25 or so.
Thanks. Many questions. See, sometimes it becomes difficult to predict the future beyond a particular level of flow. So manufacturers like us have to work on scenarios. So, for example, this could be a practical threshold, and this could be a practical upper band. So we work in a band. What is important is that all our business operations, starting from product design, number of models, battery capacity, plant configuration, the service training, etc., the infrastructure at the service workshops, etc. We have to plan in a manner that we have flexibility to address this. So honestly, we do not put too much effort in trying to predict a market which has too many factors controlling it. A better thing to do is to be prepared for change. So one of the basic things that we are starting is flexibility in our production lines. Of course, there's a cost of flexibility, but it has to be enforced. Similarly, across all these areas. The challenge with charging infrastructure is that the first few chargers that have been put up today, even they are finding very low utilization. It is a vicious circle, a chicken and egg story, where mostly today the consumer is, and Mr. Chandra can throw better light on it, is the additional car in the family who depends on home or office charging and does not do external charging much. So, and when we raise the volumes, at some point of time, of course, charging infrastructure will have a hurdle. The second hurdle will be local grid management issues, because if there are too many chargers in a geographic concentration, then charges the grid may not support it. So those kind of local issues will also come into play. But I think India is a great country. You know, the consumer will have it, he will pull, and all we have to do is get the supply side right. I'll be more concerned about the supply side than about demand. We are projecting a number of something like 15 to 20% penetration by 2030. There are different estimates. I don't think it matters much. What matters is the band and the agility and flexibility in our operations.
Right. So 15 to 20%. Shailesh, what are your thoughts? Do you think that's kind of the figure you all are thinking? And are you more optimistic, or do you think it's going to be a big number by then? And clearly, as you know, Rahul just said he's more concerned on the supply side. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts. What could be the main absolute? Then you'll be getting to one kind of a bottleneck, because finally it's that one bottleneck which really can kind of slow down the growth. I know there are multiple now, but you're addressing all of them. Price, as is coming down. People are accepting it. As you said, price parity will make it more easier for mass adoption. So just very quickly, your thoughts on a forecast, and what are really the scenarios that can lead to that kind of penetration?
See, frankly, forecast for a new technology, very difficult to predict. It is rather important that we fix a target and work on it. Right? It is very important because there's a example sitting in front of us, which is China. We are in 2023, we are talking about 2030, which is 7 years from now. If you see the data 5-6 years back where China was, it was at about 4-5%, 6% penetration. Today it is touching 26%. So what is possible in 5-6 years, if there is an intent of all the stakeholders, it happens. And therefore, for me, in my mind, I only think that 30% is something which should be taken as a target by all the stakeholders, and one should make it happen. Because you have to bring everyone together to deliver this, because if nation is thinking of and taking a pledge of becoming net carbon zero by 2070, all the actions have to start now. And for example, as we as a company have taken 2040 to become net carbon zero, I clearly know that if I'm not at 50% of penetration as Tata Motors, I'm not on my path. So for me, we are very clear that we will be 50% by 2030 as a company. And we will be doing everything to bring all the ecosystem players together to work towards that kind of a target. India is at 2% penetration, as you said. But with Tata Motors, if you see, we are 15 to 16% of our volume, 20% of our revenue is EV already. And we are very confident with all the models that we are going to launch. We are absolutely on the path of hitting 50%.
Right. Okay, great. So thanks. Thank you on that. I mean, we've had to just trim it a bit short because we started a bit late. I think, again, really thank you all for what has been a very, very enriching discussion. I think clearly what one takes away from it is that the kind of excitement, the kind of potential, and the journey that we are on in terms of electrification, it is something that is inevitable. It's just at how fast we reach there. And I think, we ended on some pretty high percentages. And if you look at that in absolute terms, it is a big number. So I think the streets will be awash with green plates. And clearly, I think in terms of addressing with public enemy number one, which is CO2, I think there's no better way. And with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for this panel. Thank you.